Thank you very much. Thank you for that great, great Florida welcome. It is so great to be back here with you. You know what's an amazing thing? When you're from Louisiana and you travel, I've met so many wonderful Floridians today. People always come up to you and they ask with great sympathy, are you poor people in Louisiana going to be okay? Y'all been through Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, and now this oil spill? You know what they're really thinking? They're too polite to say it. What's wrong with you people down there? I mean, what could possibly happen? Are y'all waiting for the locust? I mean, what more could possibly happen? Well, I'm here to tell you we are going to be okay. We're going to come back better and stronger than before. And what gives me the confidence to say that, it's not our government in Washington, D.C., it's not our government in Baton Rouge, it's our people. I spent over 100 days fighting this oil spill off of our coast. I know y'all have gone through this oil spill. I know you've gone through your own hurricanes. I want to share you a quick story about the oil spill from the coast of Louisiana. You know, the first day it really hit me, the full magnitude of this spill really hit me. I was in an airboat down in Pasalucha, some of the best fishing off of Louisiana's coast, where the river hits the Gulf. And before you could even see the oil, you could smell it. This awful, awful smell. And as you got closer to the wetlands and the grass, you could actually hear it. And what I mean by that, there was this deafening silence. This time of the year, anybody that loves to fish or hunt outdoors knows you should be hearing all kinds of critters out there. Marine life and fish and mosquitoes and bugs. But oil had killed it all. First time in my life I'd ever missed a mosquito. But there was nothing looking out there. And then as you got into the grass, you actually saw this thick, thick oil. It coated everything. You tried to touch it, it would stick to your hands. You put a water bottle into it, it would stick to that, sticks to your clothes, sticks to everything. The grass was already turning brown. The biologist said in 5 to 7 days it would be killed off because of this oil. And the frustrating thing was that it sat there day after day, week after week, nothing was being done. We pushed the federal government. They said, well, we're using absorbent boom to get that oil. It's like throwing cotton balls and paper towels into the oil. It wasn't really doing much. It would get saturated, the oil would still sit there. Another federal official said, Governor, don't worry, we've got a plan. I said, what's your plan? They said, we're going to burn the wetlands to save the wetlands. I said, that doesn't sound like a great plan to me. And here's the great thing. You know, we may not be the smartest people in the world, but everyday Louisianians live along that coast. They know those waters like the backs of their hands. This is their way of life they were trying to defend. One of those guys said to me, he said, Governor, why don't we go vacuum that oil up instead of just letting it sit there? I said, that makes great sense. Called up the federal government and said, why don't we go vacuum that oil up? They acted like I was an idiot. They said, Governor, this is the mouth of the river. How are you going to get a truck down to the mouth of the river? They said, no roads down there. I may not be the smartest guy in the world. I said, why don't you put a truck on the back of a boat and go vacuum up that oil? And I hate this answer from government. They said, oh, we can't do that. We haven't done that before. I said, well, they haven't dropped this much oil off the coast of Louisiana before either. Why don't we try something new? They didn't want to do it. I told our National Guard to build 2 prototypes. The first one was the funniest looking thing you've ever seen. We don't have a Navy, so we took a pontoon bridge instead of a boat, and we put a truck on the back of it, on top of it. Now here's the crazy thing, it actually worked. Went out there, connected a hose to it, went out a couple of miles from this funny looking contraption, picked up thousands of gallons of oil.
Shows you how much the federal government knows.
That's right. But you know what I love about the private sector? They called us up, they saw this on TV, they said, Governor, you don't need to use barges. We got barges. You don't need to use bridges. We got barges. They said, you don't need to use trucks. We got industrial pumps. Indeed, a reporter covering that first one looked at me and said, Governor, isn't that the same kind of truck y'all used to clean up the porta potties after y'all's football games? I said, well, don't put that in the press. That sounds awful. I said, that doesn't sound high-tech. Say it's a vacuum truck. It was basically the same kind of technology. Before you knew it, we had dozens of barges with pumps out there picking up thousands of gallons of oil. And then we got the phone call. About a week later, we got a phone call from a federal bureaucrat saying, we're shutting down your barges, pulling them back to port. And I said, why? They said, we haven't done our inspections yet. I said, what do you need to inspect? They said, we need to make sure you're using the right kinds of valves to make sure you're not dropping any oil into the water. I said, we're picking up thousands of gallons. You're worried about drops of oil. They said, Governor, those are the rules. I said, we'll give you 24 hours, but you've got to get this done. We don't have time to waste. Hours later, they came back to me and said they couldn't even find phone numbers for these barge companies. They didn't realize they'd approved every one of them. The right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. By the next day, they realized how absurd this was. They called us up and said, we're not going to check the valves anymore. but they still have to stay in port because we want to count the number of life jackets and fire extinguishers in every one of these boats.
Oh my goodness.
I said, why can't you do this in the bays where they're picking up the oil? And they said, no, those are the rules. Well, I headed to the port. Miraculously, by the time we got there, they changed their minds. They said, we don't have to inspect those boats anymore. They go back to work. But we had wasted 24 hours. That oil had sat in the water 24 hours longer. The reason I tell you that story, time and time again, we were told, wait for boom. Wait for the barges. Wait for the skimmers. Time and time again, we were told, just wait. Time and time again, private citizens had better answers. They said, let's use jack-up barges. Let's use berms. Let's use hard pipes. Let's fight this oil 15, 20 miles off our coast. The reason I start with that story is this. It was so important for me to come here and not only be here to help my friend Marco get elected to the United States Senate, but it's also important for me to be here to tell you what I think is at stake in this election. Let's be very clear. On one side, there is a group that thinks that the answer to all of our problems is more government spending, more government taxing, more government borrowing. On the other side stands Marco and other conservatives that understand the genius of America is our people. And let's be clear what's at stake in this election. For the first time, many of us fear that we must not become the first generation of Americans that leaves fewer opportunities for our children and our grandchildren that we inherited from our parents. And what do I mean by that? That's the American dream. If our kids play by the rules, get a great education, and work hard, they should be able to have even more opportunities than we inherited from our parents. Every generation of Americans has done that for their children. We must not become the first generation that leaves fewer opportunities for our children, but look at what's happening in Washington, D.C. The national debt's nearly $14 trillion. There's talk they want to almost double it to over $26 trillion. Even today, that is $45,000 for every person here, $100,000 for every American family. They're spending our children's and our grandchildren's money. And make no mistake about it, this is not sustainable. We can't keep spending money we don't have. China's not going to keep borrowing, not keep buying our debt, not going to keep lending us money. We know interest rates will go up. We know inflationary rates will go up. We know the value of the dollar is going to go down. That's why it's so important we elect conservatives like Marco who understand. We need to balance the budget, get rid of the earmarks. We need to have a real effective amendment to the Constitution that requires them not to spend more than they take in. Now, the skeptics will tell you it can't be done. I'm here to tell you it can be done. In Louisiana, Portfolio.com says our economy was the second best during the recession. Gallup says we're the third best state at creating jobs. Moody's says one of the first 11 states to already leave the recession. Indeed, Southern Business Development has ranked Louisiana with Tennessee the top states in the South 2 years in a row. Our unemployment has been lower than the national and the Southern average every month of the recession in the last 2.5 years. We've had the best job performance in the South, and here's the number that's the most important to me. After 20 years of losing our young people, we're the only state in the South to consistently lose our people for 2 decades. For 3 years in a row, we've had more people move into Louisiana more quickly than they're leaving. Our children and our grandchildren are coming back. I made a commitment on Inauguration Day. We would create a new Louisiana to bring our children and grandchildren home. We did it in 5 simple steps. 1, ethics reform. We had a special session my first month in office. You know, I know you've all told your favorite stories about Louisiana politicians. Look, Billy Tozan used to say back in Louisiana, half of his people were underwater, the other half were under indictment any given moment in time. The only thing Louisiana politicians were good for were to make Florida politicians look better. But we had a special session, we changed that. I'm not going to go through all the bills we passed. Center for Public Integrity said we ranked 44th worst for legislative disclosure before that session. Today, Louisiana ranks #1 in the country. The second thing we did. LSU said it was one of the most important things we could do to attract business investment. Second thing we've done. We've cut taxes multiple times. Largest income tax cut in our state's history. We got rid of taxes on debt, new equipment, utilities. By the way, I made a simple promise as governor. I made it very clear we're not raising any taxes as long as I'm governor of the great state of Louisiana. And let me talk about why this is so important. Every governor and every senator has got an important decision to make during this recession. Do you shift this burden to the working families and businesses of Florida, or do you make the tough decisions in your state capitals and your nation's capital? I'm here to tell you that we've had to tighten our belt. We cut spending 14% this year, over $4 billion. We've cut 6,000 government positions, sold over 1,000 state cars, but we are not shifting this burden to the people or the businesses of Louisiana. The third thing we've done. We've revamped workforce training, got the top-ranked workforce training program in the entire country in Louisiana, Fast Start. Fourth, we've revamped education with discipline in the classroom and other reforms. And fifth, we've invested in infrastructure more than the last 3 governors did combined during this same time period. Bottom line is this: 35,000 new jobs from economic development announcements, $5 billion in private capital investment. Why do I tell you all that? I'm here to tell you that conservative principles work. This election is a very important election, not only for Florida, but for our country. Again, you've got, on the other side, you've got folks that believe the way back to prosperity is more taxing, more spending, more borrowing, and Marco Rubio. You've got a candidate that's put forth bold and detailed plans about how he intends to make sure that government doesn't continue to spend more than it takes in. He's got bold and detailed plans to make sure that we leave more opportunities for our children and grandchildren we inherited from our parents. He's got bold and detailed plans. The government doesn't try to do so many things like running healthcare and car companies and banks, that it doesn't do its core competencies well, like responding to oil spills and natural disasters. Right before I bring up your next United States Senator and a great leader, not only for Florida, but for our entire country, let me ask you to do one thing. You're great supporters for being out here today, and I know the polls have great news for Marco. And I know that the national pundits are saying, not only is he already a United States Senator, they're already talking about his bright future ahead of that. But let's remember something. The only polls that count, the only thing that matters is what happens on Election Day. And so it is great that he's ahead in the polls. It's great that the national pundits are already talking about what he does after the election. But we have got to get him elected. We need you to talk to every one of your neighbors, make sure that they vote, make sure you put up those yard signs, and I know I'll get in trouble for saying this, but it's okay. Take some bumper stickers, put them on your neighbor's cars when you're not looking. That's all right. This close to the election, they won't notice. It's okay. You can tell them the governor said it was okay. I want you to give a great Florida welcome, not only to my friend, but the next great United States Senator from the great state of Florida, and a great leader, not only for our state, but for our country. Please give a great welcome to Marco Rubio.